All right. And there are currently no online participants. All right. So, Mr. Chair.
All right. All ready?
Yes.
All right. I will call to order this meeting of the Wabash Township Board. It is 7:07 on Tuesday, February 20th. Roll call.
Ian Pitlar's present. Ann Hill is the trustee is present. Chief Ed Ward is present. We welcome Jeremy, and your last name again is
Harris.
Harris, Harris.
Yes.
Is our new member. We welcome you and will be the recording secretary. The roll call has been performed.
All right. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
We'll look
Okay,
at this.
I thought we
We'll
had
look
a
at
flag
the
in here last
flag
time.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We obviously usually have the flag at our
Yeah, I
General
swear we
meeting.
had one up there last time. But anyway, all right. We're going to kick off today with township updates. And under here, Angel had a presentation he wanted to do on his 2024 agenda. So we're going to let him kick off with that.
And so I'll make sure to upload this presentation as well online. And so I'll share it from the video so that it's also visible to anyone that watches the meeting later. So, and okay. So for our 2024 agenda, I wanted to make sure this isn't something that we've usually done, but I wanted to give you guys an overview of what our office is seeking to do over the next year. There's some pretty significant stuff that I've chatted individually with a lot of members, as well as with the fire chief, and we wanted to share where we were kind of headed for this year. So there's a couple of pieces here. I'll start with township assistance. Okay. And township assistance, and I think I flipped those around. It would have been those main areas actually are township assistance, cemetery preservation, fire protection, properties. The first one that we're going to hit on, as I mentioned, township assistance. So for us, and this is based off of last year's budget, we're going to be able to hire a township assistance coordinator. That'll be essentially a caseworker. We're calling it, the title is not super important, but part of the reason why we're going with coordinator is because we know that the township doesn't have the resources or the ability to meet every need or all of the need or most of the need that applicants come in to this office with. So for us, it's really important that we're able to work with other resources and work with other partners in the community to help meet that need. As part of hiring that township assistance coordinator, there will be an expansion of office hours. A quick note on that, in that the current, the proposed township assistance guidelines wouldn't have that hours in there, but they have them. But the guidelines have a mechanism for how we can change the office hours, and so we will just have to post a notice 5 days in advance, and we'll also communicate it to our agency partners.
What's the change?
So right now, the current office hours are Tuesday through Friday, 1 through 5 p.m.
Yeah.
And so with the township assistance coordinator, what we're seeking to do, it'll be, I won't promise exact hours based off, because we'll have to verify with the final candidate. But what we're seeking to do is to have it available in the mornings as well. So they'll be able to do 9 to 1 and be focusing explicitly on that. And that'll be where a lot of the intakes will be going on. And then in the afternoons, even though the coordinator won't be available, the trustee, the township assistants, the township administrator would also be able to fill in that role and to continue doing that. As part of that, we're also trying to build a more robust township assistance program. So I know I mentioned the referrals to agencies. That's a really important piece. And so we want to be able to formalize that program a little bit more, to have a more structured meetings with those applicants as they come in for assistance so that we can better assess their needs. Having someone whose specific focus is that, without having to take away from other parts of the job, will be really beneficial. So we're appreciative of the board for having allocated that funding. We're also screening applicants. We want to be able to do a better job of screening applicants for basic government funded assistance. There's pieces where a lot of our applicants might be able to temporarily qualify for SNAP benefits, or what used to be called food stamp, TANF, temporary assistance for needy family, WIC, et cetera. And so we want to be able to do a better job of screening that and being able to refer folks out or help them fill out that application for the simpler ones if needed through the Township Assistance
Can I
Program.
ask a question?
Yeah.
So from your time doing this, do you find that applicants actually look at the website and instructions, or they just come in and?
So we have a mix of all of those. So we do have a lot of folks that go to the website. It's actually our standard thing that we do is refer people to the website. We'll still like explain it, but that's the place where they'll have the information available to them. There's a checklist, there's how you can apply, there's the township assistance form, there's additional forms that might be necessary. There's the form for shelter verification that the landlord would have to fill out if they're seeking rental assistance. And so they're able to do that. Now, not every client is able to meet that. And so we also have packets available at the office that folks can come in and pick up, and we'll continue to do that. But we are trying to make it a little, and it just also depends on the individual. But a lot of the folks, especially younger folks, are able to do that with more ease. Not always, but we have both options available. The last piece there is something that you probably haven't heard of before. I think I've mentioned it in passing. Working with other trustees and other communities of faith and nonprofits, we have started what's called a financial assistance network. That's part of the piece of referrals to other agencies that we're wanting to highlight. For financial assistance network, what our goal has been is to really try to make it more easy for us to communicate with each other so that we can better refer clients or applicants to other services that would meet their particular need. So it's important that we're doing that screening effectively. And so again, Township Assistance Coordinator will be great in that. Part of what we're seeking to do with that is to have an internal database. So not something that's open to the public, but for different resources to be able to understand what other services other people provide, and to have a place that's easy to update, make it a little bit easier so that we're updating it more frequently. And that's being led in partnership between our office, the Fairfield Township Trustees Office, so Monica Casanova, and then Britton Wise out of Salvation Army. So those are some of the key players that have started to build this program. And then myself, which I have two hats, I'm also with Lafayette Urban Ministry, which is the other big driver of financial assistance in the community.
Is that this financial assistance, is that a link that's going to be on the website?
No, because that's meant for internal, that's only meant for caseworkers to be able to access. So it'll be something that will be shared with all of the agencies that are being a part of the process, and other agencies that might not provide those services, but would benefit from being able to direct their clients to the appropriate places. So our goal is to try to maintain it more up to date. It's in the process of getting built.
Who's building that?
It's been myself and Monica.
Okay.
So we've been collecting the data and we will set it up so that agencies can update their information and whatnot. It'll take time for it to become second nature, right? But what we're shooting for is making sure that agencies are trying to update that when a change happens in circumstances, especially.
So this is like a financial sieve. You say, well, it doesn't fit us, but it might fit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that we can, in the social service world, which isn't the world necessarily that you guys come from, that's referred to as a warm handoff. So, we don't want to just throw you out in the cold and say, these are places that you might want to.
Right.
We want to be able to give you a warm handoff. Like, this is a place that, based off of your circumstances and what we know, would be able to meet your needs. We might even communicate with them if need be.
I think this is critical because of the increase I see at Food Finders, the amount of people we deliver food to, and we're talking, all this is increasing across the county.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think this is a great idea.
Does this fall under the purview of the new the coordinator position?
They'll also be involved in that. We'll still be, as given my two roles, I'll still be very invested in it. But part of what we sought to do was make sure that that new person would be an active participant of these programs, and being part of their expectation will be to attend community meetings and groups and partnerships and stuff like that, so that they can do a better job when they're serving the client. I think that pays off dividends for the individuals that we're seeking to help. The last one, and I'll go a little bit more in depth in that, is we have to try and figure out a way to increase civil fund levies to meet township assistance needs. One possibility, and I wanted to make that very explicit there, is that it might require for my office to at some point go and contact legislators, et cetera, because there are some changes that would allow us to meet that there could be changes that could be made to the law that are narrow and would really benefit our office for the long term. I'll go into a little bit more detail here. So the next one is the TA levy increase, right?
Can I go back before we move
Yes.
on to office hours? Have you
Yes.
had any demand for office hours that are after like business hours?
We do have demand for that. What usually happens, and what I'm comfortable with doing still, is that when an applicant needs to schedule an appointment after those hours, I'm willing to be available after hours. And it's technically part of the duties of the trustee.
Yeah.
So when an applicant needs to do that after hours, I make myself available so that they will.
What were the original hour expansions? I mean, what was the date and hours?
So we're trying to go from, currently it's 1 to 5 Tuesday through Friday, and we're trying to make it 9 to 1 every day, and then 1 to 5 Tuesday through Friday. The reason why we're not doing it on Monday still is because we're really trying to focus, myself and the township assistants, the township administrator, so Amy's position, or the clerk, what used to be called the clerk, trying to focus Monday to do a lot of the heavy lifting on the weekly financial stuff that we have to do. So we still want to set some time aside to be able to do that more effectively. But in the mornings, 9 to 1 is the goal, to be able to have throughout the week the township assistance coordinator, and then 1 to 5 those other days it'll be myself taking more of those responsibilities. So but we know that not everybody will be available 9 to 1, and so we're still, when I'm here, I'm still going to be available to be able to do those pieces. So
Stepping on Ian's question, do you think as you look at this and begin to process the amount of requests for this, maybe have one dedicated evening that'd be like from 6 to 8 or 5 to 8, so you're not doing a morning, but add an hour or 2 hours in there somewhere?
I have considered that, and it's something that I'm open to doing as well. I know that's actually the model that Monica implemented when she opened her office back up after she took over following the election in 22, and they have 1 day a week that they're open after hours, and it's something that I'm willing to explore and to move towards, because it's beneficial to the applicants in our community.
Yes.
So going on to the township assistance levy increase. Here's the existing avenues for levy increases. There's the 3-year appeal, and that's based off of how our net assessed value is growing versus the state's average assessed value. So right now, there was a change in the laws. There's been multiple changes in the law. One of them, which is I think more common to everybody, has been that there were changes in how the homestead deduction and other deductions would be applied. It came out that after this year, like the 2023 taxes paid 2024, the ones that we're getting this year are going to be based on assessed valuation after that law change. And the result across the state and the research I've done has been that it really knocked suburban and urban townships or communities from being able to receive the 3-year appeal, because what it sought to do was, at least my understanding of how it ended up working, it sought to increase the net assessed value of agricultural land, among other pieces. And so townships that have less agricultural land, or municipalities that have less agricultural land, appear to have been negatively impacted because our net assessed value won't grow as quickly. There's merits to all of that. That's just the fact of how it looks for us, right? And so we won't be eligible for the 3-year appeal for a while under that law change. And we anticipate actually that this could get worse or will get worse based off of recent changes to how rental properties are to be assessed. I'm sure that you guys have seen that a little bit in the news. And so that will make it worse for our township as well when it comes to the 3-year appeal.
Do we have an idea of how much we're going to lose on that, by the way?
There haven't been finalized numbers, so I won't speculate, but I know that it was in the order across the initial estimate that we heard rough was that across Wabash Township, so not just incorporated or unincorporated, across Wabash Township could be like in the order of half a billion in net assessed values. So that would be like a tremendous drop. I think our current total net AV is about $4 billion is our net AV for the overall township. Or sorry, $2 billion, excuse me.
So we're
Is our
losing
net.
about a quarter of our
Net
tax.
of our net AV, not of our tax revenue, but our net AV. Actually, one of the very negative, and one of the areas that I know that Chief and I, after we spoke, found really frustrating about how it currently will affect our community, is that without the assessor's office significantly changing how they assess rental properties, and that'll be subject to appeals if they go through and do the model that the community, that elected officials across the county think is smartest. One of the negative impacts of it will actually be that for us, we won't see a huge difference in the money we bring in, but the difference will be felt by our taxpayers, because that change in the law would mean that rental properties or rental property owners are paying less taxes, whereas our homeowners are taking an increase in the chunk that they're paying towards our municipalities. So it's really essentially our homeowners subsidizing our rental property owners. And that's, to me, that's a really unfortunate piece, and especially when you see the scale of it in our community. We're not the only county that's going to be affected by that. I know that there's community stakeholders that are working on those pieces and trying to. There's been some narrow fixes proposed that might exempt counties like Tippecanoe and a couple of other ones from that particular language. We don't know how likely that is to succeed in the current legislative session. We'll also have to wait and see what appeals look like after the assessor's office reevaluates how they assess rental properties to decrease the impact on taxpayers.
Quick question. I was just going to wait to the end, but I do have a quick question. So with this, homeowners are subsidizing the rental property owners. Are you talking about multi-unit rental properties, or are you talking about single-family households that are rental properties?
It's units that are five. It's places, if I remember correctly, that's 5 or more units.
Okay.
So it's not the impact towards rent. In fact, like again, it won't benefit individuals.
Yeah, if you're renting out your home, it's not.
It
you're
won't
not-
benefit.
Well, some of them have multiple units.
Yeah, but
or single family.
Yeah, but it's rare that they
units.
would have 5 units in a household, in one particular house.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
the other piece, and so the other avenue that's available to the township is, and I can get you guys a specific Indiana code if you would like to see it specifically spelled out. I have it in my email somewhere when I communicated with the Department of Local Government Finance. There's a big requirement in state code that the township board shall levy sufficient funds to meet township assistance need in the township. There is whereas most of the processes for appealing levies, like what we did for the fire protection, are very defined, and they have a specific definition of how you have to do that. For the township assistance one, for this particular one, it's very vague. So the rate of success really varies, and what we have been told over and over again, by both the township, the ITA, the Indiana Township Association, other trustees that have been really focused on that issue, including Kevin Evans, who was a trustee for Frankfurt. Now he's a trustee for a smaller township, actually, is that for that appeal to be successful, it needs to go through a consultant. So like hiring a financial consultant that's able to help us with that. So a piece, and I'll go back to it at the end. I'll be looking at some point this year. The likelihood is that we will seek to hire a financial consultant for this and a couple other pieces that we'll see in the presentation.
I'm questioning why we need to hire a financial consultant.
Usually, and this is, the the financial consultant has particular expertise on subjects that are harder for, like, they go through a ton of appeals for different municipalities. So they have, it's like kind of like when you hire a grant writer.
So ITA can't do this?
ITA does not provide that service. They recommend people for you to hire, but that's not something.
Local government finance?
No, because they're the ones you're applying to for an appeal. So it's like essentially like when you go to a grant writer, and they're the one helping you write the grant, and they have the experience as to what tends to be successful, what data they need to be able to be successful.
So there's no guarantee, even with this consultant, that we're gonna spend money with our fingers crossed, and we're gonna get something.
Actually, one of the benefits of most of these, and for what it's worth, most of these usually charge a portion of the funds if the appeal goes through. So it's
That I'd become more comfortable with.
so that's
So a big benefit of a financial consultant would also be their knowledge and ability to dig into the IC code, even knowing new things that are coming that we won't know about until long after legislation has been passed. So their ability to dig in and also see the way other municipalities have done the same thing we're trying to do in our environment, kind of like we've tried to do with other fire departments, trying to figure out where across the state we can find an apples to apples comparison has been very, very difficult. So same sort of process with the financial consultant, their ability to dig in based on what our needs assessment is, and their ability to dig in and find that like item to be able to try to do the thing we're trying to do.
And we haven't sought out quotes or anything at this point, so I would anticipate most likely, frankly, that I will spend some time in the coming weeks and months, and that I'll probably have something for you guys to consider in the April meeting.
Okay.
Depending on the level of appetite from the board to
And
consider.
there's no
that.
way to predict yet what this loss or gain in income is gonna be for this township assistant.
Well, no, we wouldn't lose anything. That far is certain, but the amount that we would earn is hard. Like I can tell you, like for example, a 3-year appeal. The recommendation on the 3-year appeal was get a financial consultant. I, being more tech and spreadsheet savvy than most people, was able to get out of DLGF what specific information I was going to need to try to do that appeal. And I would have been willing to consider hire a financial consultant if it was close or anything like that. But based off of the results that we got, and I corroborated them with DLGF, there was no point because it's very clear cut. You meet it or you don't. And we didn't meet it for that year. We would have met it for all of the last 6 or 7 years, but with the homestead tax change, we would no longer meet it. So we didn't apply and we didn't hire anyone because it would have been a waste of money. But for this one, it's something that every indication is we would need a financial consultant to have a chance, and there would be possibilities of a significant increase. Now, that's a vague answer because, like, if the language is vague, what is sufficient funds to be levied, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's hard to be able to define that. So the other avenue, and it's one, they're not mutually exclusive. Another avenue that I'm planning on doing here in the next year is to reach out to legislators to try to work with the ITA as well, and seek and narrow exceptions for townships that have very low civil levies. So as you guys might be aware, our civil levies and our fire levies prior to the increase in based off of the population growth are really, based off of Indiana now has maximum levies. So the levy grows a certain percentage year over year, regardless of anything else, and it's defined by the state. For us, when the state changed from rate driven to levy driven, we got locked in at what the elected officials at that time in the township were levying. And so we've been really negatively impacted. For example, per capita in Frankfurt, as an example, the Center Township trustee, they have about 10 times the funding that we do for the levy per capita. And so we are way behind where most municipalities would need to be able to meet all of the need. A potential narrow exemption is to seek, like, if your total levy is less than at say 1 cent or 2 cents or 3 cents per $100 of certified net assessed value, that you could appeal to try to increase that to that amount. For us, that would be really significant. Our current Wabash Township civil levies, which is fire department, general fund, if we created, not fire department, excuse me, township assistance, general fund, and if we created any non-fire related funds, our maximum levy is $71,000 for all of those
Yeah, not a
funds and
lot.
services. And so that's very, very low. And so that's why that's something that's of interest to myself in seeking. It's a reasonable thing. You know, right now, if you're talking 0.26 cents per $100 of certified net assessed value, I know that I've done this calculation before.
Remind me what one of the, like Shelby or like what are those guys charging?
About the same for this, because they're not investing in township assistance either.
What is it for like Monroe then?
I could get you that number. I don't have it off
somewhere
the top of my
that
head.
like they're actually doing it. Would be a good
Yeah,
comparison.
but that's actually why I was using Center Township. Even though they're a smaller township, they have a population of about 10,000 or something like that, or 15,000, and they have per capita, so not certified net assessed value, but still relevant comparison. They're getting 10 times the amount of funds that we are for their township assistance fund per capita. You know,
Okay.
and I don't, what I'm saying, I don't want to imply that our township assistance fund needs to be $700,000. It doesn't need to be that high, but it has.
It gives you a frame of reference.
But it gives you a frame of reference as to how much our, the funding that we have available is. So that's one avenue. I think that's important, particularly, although we're not at any imminent or any real risk in the short term of having that arise. If West Lafayette were to annex additional territory, right now the way that we're able to make our general and township assistance budgets work, as I've mentioned, is because our fire protection is higher, and that our fire protection funding is higher, and that allows more local income tax shares to come in, and those have to be used in the general fund, right? And so that's right now how we're being able to meet the need for staffing in our office, which we're still understaffing compared to any other office of a comparable size or whatnot, but we're making do with what we have, and trying to do as best we can in the assistance. But if we run into a situation where significant portions of our area get annexed by the city, then our fire funding would drop, and we would also see a drop in that funding for township assistance in the general fund. And we don't want to end up in a position where that could happen. So as we plan for the long-term stability of our funding, these are important avenues to try to seek out. So
is annex something that's currently being discussed?
No,
Not that I know of.
not that we're aware of. It's
Okay.
probably in the next, I wouldn't anticipate it in the next 5 years, but it can, especially not for significant portions, but as a trustee, I'm trying to make sure that we're planning for the long-term future of our township as well, especially with a lot of growth, a lot of population growth. Again, it's still levy driven. So even though we have a lot of population increase, our levy doesn't grow with it either, because they're completely independent one from the other. Going on to the next thing, which is cemetery preservation.
I do have one more question. How many people are using the township assistance currently? Are we exceeding the funds that we currently have?
Yes.
Do we have,
Mhm.
by how much?
It's 15,000 last year.
Last year was 15,000. So there's a lot of need in our community, and so we're trying to get ahead and plan for it. So, as for cemetery preservation, we recently went through and did a request from West Lafayette that to ensure that McCormick and Burton cemeteries were protected as historic preservation or historic conservation districts, and that was approved by the West Lafayette City Council. The next steps for our township are to try to seek fundraising from community organizations and community individuals to try to preserve the headstones and the history. Working with volunteer groups and other agencies that are interested in preserving our history is also important. And not in large scale, increases, but we also want to see if there's a possibility based off of where we land in potential revenue streams to try to include further funding for cemetery preservation in next year's budget. Because right now we really, as you guys know, our budget is really based off of doing bare minimum work to keep our cemeteries afloat. And so we're trying to do a little bit more as we can to try to do that.
I mean, that's why the whole last part is so painful.
Yeah,
You're just trying to stretch 71 grand across.
exactly. And so that's
Too much stuff.
and so for fire protection, here's what we've accomplished so far. So far this year, as we've indicated, our firefighters, we were able to get a 20% increase in pay to try to. We're still way behind other agencies in the community, but we're trying to get to being more competitive. So that's what we're at right now. We have the funding to have 12 firefighters, and that's 10 firefighters on shift plus 2 administrative officers, the deputy chief and the fire chief. And then we also have funding for volunteer recruitment. And so we're doing a lot of that. I think that Ed can also speak to how successful we've been in recent classes of volunteers and bringing in a lot of young folks that have a lot of interest, that are being engaged. And that's really awesome stuff. For us, what comes next? Seeking public safety tax income. That's one of the resolutions that is being considered today. I know that we did that last year. The county, the important municipalities did not consider that request last year, but we're starting earlier this year and continuing to have a conversation with the relevant parties. And so this is an important step to allow us to seek that. We need to continue providing training for new volunteers. That's something that we have been doing really well. Part of the reason why we're not currently in the usual meeting room is because there's an EMT class going on. That's the kind of stuff that we're trying to do more. As we increase volunteers and we try to really continue our tradition and legacy of really training our volunteers to be just as effective as our career staff, we need to be able to continue investing in that. And so we will be keeping a closer eye on that line item particularly. That's one that I anticipate that as we try to do better, there might be more need for funding on that line item for future years. So just something that we're continuing to work through and try to do well by our staff, both volunteers and career. The last one of the other pieces is the SAFER grant. I know that we've spoken about that in the past. That would allow us to apply to what we're considering right now. What we think is sustainable is to be able to apply for 3 more staffers in this cycle. This is really important for us. This grant cycle is expected to be the last one that will fully fund 100% of the firefighters' salaries over the course of 3 years. That'll be really beneficial to our township in allowing us to build up that fire protection to where we will need to be in the coming years, while allowing us to ramp up without having that impact on our community's tax dollars towards our department. So that's something that we're really choosing to invest in. There's other grants that we're also seeking, including the AFG, which is the Assistance to Firefighters grant, and other grants that we're continuing to seek. We have been very successful at that in a couple of areas. I'll highlight the MIH program, for example. The MIH program is one that our fire department and the trustee's office have really chosen to invest energy in. Over the course of the last year, we've received 3 grants that are related to that overall. So,
MIH?
Mobile Integrated Health.
That's the one,
yeah. And so the MIH program, the Mobile Integrated Health Program, we received $315,000 over the course of 3 years. We've also received the $10,000 towards the installation of the Safe Haven baby box, which will be going live in the coming weeks. We've also received a grant which is another one that's on the agenda today, about $32,000 or $35,000 for funding for a couple of for equipment and medical supplies that are necessary for the operation of MIH. The other things that are important for us is formalizing the auto aid agreement with interested neighboring municipalities, so West Lafayette, Battleground, Purdue, and then evaluating building needs. And so I'll get to building needs particularly here in the coming pieces. So building needs and properties. So we have 2 stations, as you guys are aware right now. There's Station 2, which is currently on Newman Road, and then there's Station 1, which is this one. For us, part of the reason, and we're bringing it before any decisions or anything, or any recommendations, but for us, part of the reason why we're really focusing on that is right now, Station 2 is primarily a vehicle repository. It's not where population growth is currently taking place. Once upon a time, it made a lot more sense, especially when the railroad really divided our community, and there were a lot of volunteers that were on that side of the town. But given where our current population is and our population centers, Station 2 doesn't, it's not a place where any of our volunteers are first response out to. They come here to this station first. And so part of what we're considering is to sell Station 2 at some point, because it's not where we believe our growth is going to be in the near future. It's not where our next, if we had the ability to staff a second station, it's not where that would be taking place. And so for us, that's something that's really important. We are, there's possibilities out there. Part of that also with tied to auto aid, we can work with Purdue and West Lafayette to try to improve the process and like delineate, other responding apparatuses to kind of help cover that need. We would still be the agency responsible, but for major incidents, we would be able to have stronger partnerships with other folks. Station 1, which is this station, we are really running into an office space crunch. Right now, we don't have enough office space to really meet the current fire department and trustees' offices needs. We are just at the level where our fire department just right now has exactly the right amount. So any population, any growth in staffing will make it really hard to have offices for our staff to do their roles. We also know right now MIH is something that we know will require more space in the future. Right now they're operating out of a tiny office on that side of our building. And then on the trustee side, we're also feeling the crunch right now. We are down to one office that's shared by 2 staffers. We're not able to meet privately with township assistance applicants. We don't have a waiting space that really fits more than one person sitting outside waiting. And we don't have any ability to provide other resources or other townships will have spaces for applicants to be able to fill out jobs, like job applications, to be able to download necessary documentation or print off stuff. We don't have any ability to do that in our current space. And so we're really limited. And as we're trying to do better by our residents in the township trustee's office, that's a constraint that we're currently facing.
So Station 2, what do
Yes.
we think it's worth, and how much are we going to have to invest in fixing the driveway in order to sell it?
We're currently we should be good on the driveway by the end of that's the money that we already allocated for last year.
Okay.
That we did through the encumbrance.
Mm.
We should we haven't I don't want to like give you any certainty of this number, but our initial conversation is that we expect that we could get in the ballpark of $500,000 for that property. Now, that's very initial.
Yeah.
I don't want to help that number because it's just what we understand.
I think the truth of the matter is the cost of the building is going to change based on the want for that building as things start to go up around the airport.
Yeah, it's going to be
Purdue's going to want that one. Purdue's going to want it really bad.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that we hold on to it until
They want it bad enough.
they want it really bad.
Yeah.
And we have space for those vehicles.
So this is where we're tying into this. You're asking. Your head is going in the right direction. So for Station 2, going into new infrastructure. Let's start with Station 1, where we're at right now. One, and this is we're getting information out to the board. My goal is to start having some input sessions with other stakeholders in the community. But what we are currently considering is building an additional building in the back of we have like a lot of land behind the parking lot where we would be able to build a building. It would allow for township assistance work to be carried out more effectively. There's other resources and needs in the community that I don't think we have to provide direct service, but that in building a new building that meets our need for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, we would also be able to have space that community partners can utilize. One of those needs that comes up a lot when it comes to which, township assistance, it's in the realm of township assistance, is food resources. And so we don't have any food pantries that out on this side of the community. So one possibility would be to build a space that includes space for a food pantry that we wouldn't operate, but that we would be able to, allow community agencies to operate out of.
Yeah, the closest is Audubon and Fowler.
Exactly. And West Lafayette has one food pantry that's moving away actually, because they're expanding hours in the Lafayette side,
Yep.
but we're too far. Their current location is too far away from the need in West Lafayette. This is where the pocket of need is in West Lafayette.
And that would just be on the lot back here.
On the lot.
And we already own the land.
Where we already own the
So we're
land.
talking about extending the building instead of a separate building.
So it would probably be a separate building, but we're not tied to any, again, we haven't had any design or any conversations at this point, but it probably would make most sense is also to keep it a little bit more separate so that there's a bit more separation too between day-to-day operations of the township's office, trustee's office and the fire department as well, making it a little bit more like larger municipalities.
So Chief, it seems like we're walking a fine line between when will West Lafayette annex portions of this that have gone up to Caliber, actually a little farther up than Caliber. And then the growth is this way, not this way. And we're looking at where would the next station be?
So that's part of what we're trying to discuss here as well. It's the next bullet point here. But in Station 1, in the meantime, what this new building or this additional building or extension, depending on what it could potentially end up being, one of the pieces that it would also allow us to do is provide potential housing for additional vehicles. So we could build, even if the main building is meant for township assistance and community resources and potential spaces for other agencies to come in and serve our community out of here, like essentially a hotspot where they could come and provide services once a week or once a month or whatnot. We would also be able to build additional bays that could house the apparatuses that we would need to move here if we sold Station 2. So that's one of the possibilities that we're currently discussing as part of what a Station 1 additional building would look like. And that would still work fine, right? Because even if West Lafayette, thinking about 10, 20, 30 years down the line, West Lafayette annexes past this point, West Lafayette is going to need to have a fire station here. And so there would be some transfer of land and money, et cetera, at that point. But West Lafayette would be able to utilize this fire station and operate out of it. And the township trustees would still be able to house, their facility and have a space that's separate from West Lafayette at that point.
Until that time, to meet the needs of the unincorporated area, it's where do we go next?
Exactly. And so that's for us, here's the where we go next. So we're talking about a future Station 2 is also part of the conversation. Now, there's a couple of pieces that we're looking to utilize to inform that decision. One is current and existing growth and planned growth. There's also the land use study, which is being finalized here, that really highlights where the community is comfortable with potential growth of population, et cetera. That will really inform where we anticipate the next humans living in our community to be. We have a couple of resources that we want to be able to tie in to help us with this. The Indiana Association of Firefighters, the Professional Firefighters Union of Indiana, which the PFFUI has the ability to have resources like that. And so they help their departments that are unionized and being able to look at data. And that's one of the things that they actually can provide to the municipality at no cost. And so, or low cost, but I think it's no cost if I remember correctly. And so that would allow us to really get a better grasp as to where we need our next station to be or where we anticipate that. And so part of what we would do with that, although there isn't an immediate need to have a second station because we can't staff it at the moment, we would be able to buy the land and hold it so that when we do reach a point where we have staffing need to, where we have the ability to staff it and we have the growth that needs a second station, we can build there and have the land ready to be developed at that point. So that's one of the pieces that we are looking long term at doing, and that begins with studies like that we're suggesting.
So this is a 2024 agenda.
Oh yeah.
So are you saying you want to build a new building out here this year?
No, but I want to do the pieces that are necessary to start looking at building a new building. Part of it, and I'll start probably in the order in which it's important to us. First, to be able to determine what the need is on the trustee side of the building, we want to be able to meet with stakeholders in the communities. We're a big part of the trustee's office, even if it's not currently a big part of our funding, is to provide township assistance, right? And that's a real big need that we've identified and that we believe is important. So working with the other community agencies that are in the realm of social services to really understand what their perspective of the need is, so that as we plan and see at what we need to build, we have a better idea of what that would need to look like. So that's part of what I'm hoping to do this year. A second part of it, and this actually goes back to the financial consultant, we would really need to start looking at what would it cost to build, what would the process be for doing that? We imagine that it would be a bond or a type of debt, right? It would probably be, and I'm just spitballing, we're currently going through the process of building a building for the Wesley Foundation on campus, and that's a huge building, nowhere near what we're trying to build. That's $7.5 million, or around that amount. We would anticipate that building a building that meets the need for 30, 40 years would cost upwards of $1 million, maybe upwards of $2 million. So we would need to really plan a debt and have an understanding of what it would cost the constituents.
You're talking today's dollars.
Yes, today's dollars. And so we would really want to be able to plan for that and to understand what the impact would be on the taxpayers and how long we would have to repay it, and really to be able to allow you guys to make a good decision as to whether it's financially feasible, realistic, et cetera, because that's not something that happens overnight. Me coming in here doesn't,
So about Fire Station 1, I mean, what?
This is Station 1, yes.
Oh, sorry, 2. I've been to 2 too. What? I know you said it serves kind of like a storage function for the vehicles. I mean, is it being utilized financially in any way,
No.
beneficial to the township?
I would say that its benefit is in being a repository right now. Yeah. I think I think we ran the numbers earlier, and I think that last year there wasn't a single run that originated out of that station.
Yeah.
And the apparatuses that are housed there, which one of them we sold last year, which was 606, we responded to as a frontline vehicle, less than 10 calls out of 1,300. So it really is because we don't have enough space in this station to house all of the vehicles. Some of the vehicles live there, and it's
a very expensive
practical.
garage.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yes.
It's a very expensive garage. So
There's a reason that the driveway is basically rubble.
Yeah. Do you have something?
I do have a different perspective on that. The purpose of the station wasn't just to be a repository for fire trucks. We have a station resident program. Mm-hmm. There's an apartment that's at Station 2. So when there were 2 fire trucks housed at Station 2, we had a station resident that lived in that apartment, which is a very good program that I don't think we should ever get rid of.
Exactly.
So that apartment affords somebody to be there to maintain the apparatus, to maintain the stations, that gives response, even if it be one person responding in one of our EMS vehicles down there, getting quicker response to people down there. I think there's a benefit to having the station there. I think there's a benefit to response out of it when we have somebody living there. When we don't have somebody living there, yes, it turns into a repository and a place that we can store things. So.
And sorry.
Go ahead.
And I think that the challenge there is, right now when it comes to the bigger apparatus, not medical calls, but bigger apparatuses, we've tried to move away from just having one person respond on a vehicle, right? And so for larger apparatuses, it doesn't meet really the ability of us to staff that station the way that we want to be able to respond to calls. And it's, as Ed mentioned, it's not that it's useless, but in its current iteration and right now, I would say that it is, currently serves primarily as a
Underutilized.
repository. It's underutilized.
Or
Right,
what-
right.
what
That's what I
we
was
need-
wondering.
Yeah, it sounds
It's
like we'd be
fine.
better off building an apartment in this building and just not having it. Like if that's the main
Yeah.
benefit we want to get out of it, especially if we didn't do a run out of it last year.
That was my concern. My question was what the utilization was.
I don't disagree that the resident program is
really
great,
good. Yeah.
but yeah, we could build one here or in this new building, or like there's other solutions, right?
Now,
There's other solutions.
would
Yeah.
we build? Would we do something about Fire Station 2 before we just the plans to extend this building would be done? How would that
So
work?
I don't want to tie us into one or the other necessarily. I think that we would probably hold off on buying new land for a future Station 2 while we still have our current Station 2.
Well, I meant like, did we
Yeah.
want to get rid of it
Before
sell it?
I think that we would I think that we would treat it, at least my initial perspective. I haven't gone that
Yeah,
far
it's
into
just
the rabbit hole
speculation
in
now. Yeah.
finances. My initial perspective is that we would treat the expansion of Station 1 and our current Station 2 as fairly independent of one another as the decision goes. But building a new Station 1 would probably to some extent need to precede the selling of Station 2 because we want to be able to house our apparatuses when we do sell Station 2, our current Station 2, because we would need to be able to have a place where we would keep them. And it's not that they can't sometimes be kept outside, but that's not good for the maintenance and the wear and tear and all of that and of the apparatus, I would say. So did I miss something, Ed, from your perspective that you want to add?
No, I agree that they need to be probably independent of one another. I think that obviously we're all, to get back to the question you asked me 10 minutes ago, obviously our growth would end up being northwest of here, without a doubt. It would have to be that direction, but pulling apparatus up here would end up being the next, part of that process. Not getting rid of Station 2 is bittersweet, right? It's one of those things that I think it's in an ideal place. I think if you live down on Circle Drive, you live down on South River, that's a safety blanket to most people. They don't realize that there's not people housing that fire station. As we're growing, as we've been adding people, I think a lot of those folks just don't know what they don't know. They don't understand that all of our frontline apparatus, our first response, will always be out of this building.
Mm-hmm.
So until we have if today we had, 6 guys on a shift, could we justify sending 2 people to Station 2 and staffing Station 2? Probably. We could justify that in the second station. We could justify having a couple people peeled off in another firehouse someplace that allows that response to divide us up a little bit. But that process is still going to have to happen. We sold 606. Our process right now is, and we're in the process of trying to spec a truck, but it's not going to be the replacement for 6. We're hoping to get something, newer used that we can replace that truck with, which will happen sooner than if we go order a truck that's going to take 3 years to get to us.
Yeah.
So once we get that truck, we will have to have a place to house it. I think that fire trucks aside, talking about adding an apartment, talking about doing those things here, we are locked in this building. There was horrible use of the space in this building when the building was built. So that's what all the construction that we've been doing has been trying to do, is maximize what we can get our hands on area-wise within the building. So that area out back is obviously the most open area. I think that trying to add on to the building, we start cutting down parking space out back. We start losing area that we utilize a lot. That parking area out back for the 4, 5, 6, 7 events a year that this place is full. It's not just full; it's spilling out into Phoenician Blind, Klondike Road. So cutting down that space is an issue. So, I think that our the feasibility study, we've got the ability to have the PFFUI start a feasibility study for us, and they will be able to tell us down to the square mile where that would be the best based on growth, based on all kinds of things that we don't have access to. But it's obvious it'll end up being Northwest. You know, we've had a lot of conversation. It's since this building was, or since this department started in 1971, there's been this, oh no, the big bad wolf, West Lafayette's gonna come take over all of our shit. Stuff, sorry, it's being recorded. That's always been the worry. I mean, always, to the point.
That's why I'm not super worried about when we talk about
To the
that,
point
because
that
I just haven't heard
vapor locks
anything
people.
about
We
it.
don't want to move forward because what if? The reality of it is, if we found out today that January 1st, the city of West Lafayette was taking over everything we have, we still have a job to do until January 1st. So we've got to be able to progress forward. I can tell you, my belief, and I think On Health is the same based on conversations we've had and things that, you know, we've kind of watched the workings of things. I don't envision that happening within 5, 6, 7 years, even if at that point there will be conversation. So, you know, the process with Station 2, I believe, you know, especially we got a new pad down there now that they've been working on, and now I go down there and I'm like, man, I really don't want to get rid of this place, right? Because it just makes it more functional and usable, right? But having said that, when the growth is occurring in that direction, there just will end up having to be that change. So it's hard to figure out today what that growth plan needs to look like when we're kind of blowing up all over. You know, it seems like all that growth is north, but we have new apartment buildings going up here. We've
All
got
those,
new going
all that
down.
aerospace
I mean,
industry going
that's
down there.
exactly right. It's kind of all over. So I think our north-south idea of how firehouses is ideal because our territory is very, very long.
Yes.
But trying to figure out where those be, because we're right in the middle here. This is a fantastic place, but we're right in the middle. So trying to figure out where to hopscotch or leapfrog and get the other places is difficult. I think Station 2 will serve us well for a while, but I think that based on the growth and how fast things are blowing up around the airport, I think Purdue will want their hands on that property faster than we expect them to, especially with the increase in, with them starting their commercial traffic. When they do that, I met with Chief Anderson this last week, and once that process starts, they will have to have the airport staffed 8 hours a day at least, and that's during that window of time. And right now, their fire truck is in a hangar, just sitting in a hangar, so they don't really have adequate space for that. So Station 2 looks a whole lot more appealing as a fire station when it's already a fire station, and they can just give themselves access to the airport. So if nothing else, there's all kinds of possibilities and things to do, but we need it as a place to store things right now. We need it as a place to store a boat that we got, and soon to be 2 trucks when we, for sure our second or our replacement, and things like that. So,
My apologies, my computer's dying.
So I think there's a lot of things that we need to consider, but I think having said that, we are within this building, we're stuck. We're pretty much locked in. Our construction is happening upstairs. We put our bedrooms up there. We took one big room and we were able to make 7 bedrooms out of it. A storage room, we were able to move stuff and make our locker room. Our kitchen lounge area up there is being worked on right now. We've tried to utilize as much space in this building as we can utilize, and we're very quickly running out of space, especially administrative sort of space. I mean, if we were to try to break this room up into offices for these officer positions, I mean, there just wouldn't be space for it. So this works out well for what we're trying to do here, but we're to a place that we're working on an assistant for the fire department side to help with billing stuff, administrative paperwork stuff, that back end. And that's a part-time position that we've got approved to do this year. I just don't know where to put the person. So, I'm running out of, they can sit next to me in my office and I got a table they can sit at, but it's just, we're running out of space for people. And so we have to kind of think outside the box too. I think that building another building out back here is something that
Well, I mean, I'm thinking immediately that like if you got to make a deal with Purdue, there's probably space. Like if it's for apparatus that we're not actively using every day, I got to think Purdue has somewhere we could toss that and make it part of the sale.
Well, and I think that we're in a good spot right now, given that we don't, we haven't purchased a replacement for 606 yet. We haven't, I think we're in a good spot, but I think everything's got to be on the table right now. I think that they are, as much as we're growing, the trustee's office has given and given and given to try to shrink themselves down to give more space in this building. And I appreciate that, but at some point we're still growing and they are at the same time. So there's got to be an option. So I do everything based on, and this is probably the wrong way, but I look at everything as what's the worst that's going to happen if, right? If I plan that way, everything else works okay. To me, worst thing that's going to happen is 5-6 years down the road, they decide, say West Lafayette decides they want this building. They've got they come this direction. They want to put fire trucks in this building. The beautiful part of that is that they're going to need people and fire trucks. Conveniently, we have those things, right? So, but the trustee's office still has to exist. There's still got to be a place for that business to happen. And I think truthfully, for their purpose, there probably isn't a better place in our township to be located, but on this property.
Yeah.
So.
And part of what we're actually, as I mentioned with the conversation with other stakeholders, that's one of the things that they bring. I can tell you again from experience working in Lafayette Urban Ministry and previously at Food Finders, we just did I suggested to my supervisor, and it was a little bit self-serving and selfish, because it allows me to also see the need from a perspective of a township trustee too, about where the services that they were give me a heat map of the people that you're serving, where they live, the instances of assistance and all of those pieces. And outside of Lafayette, the next big pocket of need is here.
Yep.
Is right where we're at.
Yep.
So that's part of what's important to us to really plan for.
Yep.
West Lafayette is a fortunate community overall compared to most places, because we have a significant portion of our population that's high income, that's educated. Purdue's a big driver of economic development, and but that doesn't mean that there still aren't people that need assistance, right? And where in our community are they? They're here right now. So.
Well, and with what Ed has said and you said is, as they build all these apartments, a lot of that's going to be temporary housing, and eventually they're going to be in your office asking for funds and assistance, because I see these things crop up
Everywhere,
and that's what it's going to turn into.
and so that's kind of why it's important to us. Yeah. Anyway, that's my presentation on the agenda. I know that there's a couple of really big items here, but I want to make you aware of what our office is working towards. I'm of the opinion that having a good working partnership with our board has worked really, really well, and keeping you informed and making you active participants of the process is necessary. We also want to be open and transparent about what we're thinking. We're really doing a lot with the money that we have, and we're stretching ourselves thin in a way that's really benefiting our. We're trying to stretch ourselves thin to meet the needs of our community.
We're using everything you've got to its fullest potential.
Absolutely. And so we want to keep doing that, but we have to plan for the future. And so these are some of the big pieces we're focused on. So.
Okay. We could keep talking about it, but
I know.
I got to cut you off now. I remember a time when you told me this would take 10 minutes.
There were a lot of questions in between too.
And I remember thinking that's a lie. But Ed, do you have anything you want to add for fire department up there? Are we good? All right.
Good job, Emma. That's very good. Very good.
Okay. I appreciate being brought up to speed on all this. I'm sure we'll continue to have conversations about these over the next couple of meetings. All right. Public comment.
How many people come in per week asking for assistance? And how has that changed over the last 2 years?
Per week? Let me pull up the number. I don't have it right off the top here. I will tell you that in the last year, let me pull up our financial report. That'll probably be the best answer I can give you in a very short. Let me pull up our annual financial report, has that data. Gateway. report search, annual financial report. Township assistance.
Well, one little caveat here is we went from the previous administration, we had one assistance grant of $250 as opposed to
Last year we did
17,000.
72,000.
72,000.
Yeah.
So
72 or
72,000. 72,000.
in a 2-year gap, that was 2 years.
So we are a lot closer now to where we're still way behind other municipalities, as I mentioned, per capita, per need, per all of that. But last year we, the total benefit of like provided to recipients of township assistance was just under 72,000. We had 173 requests for assistance last year. And the total number of recipients was 207. That includes, family members, obviously sometimes. And township assistance is not meant to be ongoing, but there are situations where the same family might have multiple instances of need, right? And so that's one of those pieces. So there were 207 total recipients of township assistance.
How do you have more recipients than requests?
Because it includes individual members of families. So like if you have a family with 2 or 3 individuals, those are total recipients.
And we're only open for about.
So my
So
wife
there-
and I we could file separately for,
No,
that's what I just
That's
heard.
like if you are the head of household in a family and you apply for aid, then depending on the type of aid, sometimes like if you had 4 people in your family, it would count as giving aid to 4 people.
yes.
I see.
What do you typically, is it rent? Is it?
The
what?
most common one is rent. So last year we provided 65,000 in rent, 6,000 was utilities. And we provided aid, like I mentioned, there was 173 requests total of assistance.
How many were turned down?
I can tell you. Let me see here. I know that I'm not able to see that here in the statistical report. I would have to pull a little bit more deeply into that. But we had 78 households that contained recipients of assistance requests, which tells you the average household that requested assistance was just under 3 people. Or the average household that received assistance was just under 3 people. So I'm trying to see if there's anything that says about approved or denied in the statistical report, and I'm not currently seeing it. So it's not in the data that the state requires and that we submit to them.
So being open 4 days a week, I mean, that's a request granted like every other day.
Yeah.
Basically.
And so, it's a lot of need, like you mentioned. So any other questions from members or comments from members of the public or questions?
3% of the population.
So, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Ian, thank you. Mentioned, so in discussing Station 2 and the apparatus you have there, and then tying that in with the growth that potentially is northwest, we don't know, but.
Mhm.
So in looking to that, if you're anticipating growth in the next 5 to 7 years, if you already have apparatus on hand, underutilized, would it not make sense to keep that apparatus you're anticipating this growth is going to happen. You're going to have a new Station 2 so that you have apparatus in place.
We're not getting rid of the apparatus. We would be getting rid of the station and finding a place to put the
Okay, I
apparatus that are
misunderstood. I
currently.
thought maybe
there.
it said selling the apparatus.
No, we would sell the station. Then the conversation is about, well, where do we put the apparatus
And that
in the meantime?
and that's where
Okay.
tied into the discussion of a potential new building and here behind it, including additional
Yeah.
bays to house our existing apparatus.
So I guess not so much a question as clarification.
Yeah.
I
No,
I
you're all
thought I
good.
heard something.
Yeah.
No, no,
And we there's all sorts of reasons not to sell it. Not the least of which is that buying new
apparatus is
is
really expensive.
it's not only is it expensive, but the lead time is outrageous.
Right, 3 years for.
And that's the low end. West Lafayette just ordered a ladder and they told them initially 5 years from the time they placed the order till it was delivered to them. So
Yeah.
that's why our truck spec process isn't going to be to replace the truck we just got rid of. It's the next truck after that we're spec'ing and gonna place an order for. And we're gonna buy something gently used, then we can replace that truck.
And in 5 years, I mean, I would expect the township grows at least 5%, if not 10% in
Yeah.
population.
Well, that's part of what we
It's
have had
exploding.
Yeah.
ongoing discussions, based off of current known developments. I think that we already have 10 to 15, close to 20% that we're aware of, and just a few developments that we've added up together based off of,
Yeah.
the
Once
percentage
you
of
get in a large
population
pop.
growth. For our
Does
service
that
area.
factor in the transient population, i.e. Purdue students mostly?
For the most part, no, because most of those students are outside of our fire service area. But it does include some students that are part of our service area.
I mean, I do see a lot of students out this way.
It's
Yeah.
mostly grad students.
But it's mostly grad students that live far out this way, and they live here throughout the year for the most part. But even then, that it's not like there's a ton of statistical data on that. I'm basing it off of circumstantial or secondhand.
And I mean, either way, if it lights on fire, like
If it lights on
yeah,
fire,
we got-
yeah, we have to respond to
We
it.
gotta
Whether
do
it's
it.
students or whoever it be.
The lights on fire, gotcha.
All right.
anything else from the public?
Just thank you for posting these meetings on YouTube, making them available. I don't usually come to these. I'm here with my daughter today, but I always make sure when they're posted to watch them on YouTube. That way I at least can keep up to date, or not watch them, but listen to them on YouTube normally. I appreciate that. I think that's very helpful to making these available to the public.
Awesome.
Even
That's-
if you only get like 2 or 3 views.
That's
And
okay.
maybe
Yeah.
they're me. I
Hey,
don't know.
it is encouraging to hear that when
It is worth
when we're
at
going
least
through all the
trying.
effort. Yeah, that's
So
great.
you're not viral.
Not
No.
viral yet.
No,
We
I would
used to
be
be viral.
shocked.
We were for a while.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
we made
Not
it
the good
boring
kind of
again.
viral.
Make sure you click like a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll click the bell. That way I get the notification. Put the bell on.
Okay. I forgot to put the minutes on here, but we can, let's come back to it next meeting because I know you haven't had a chance to review it anyway. All right, new business. We have a couple of resolutions here. Most of these are pretty boilerplate, luckily, so I don't expect we are going to have to spend a ton of time on these. So, Resolution 2024-05, establishing the township assistance standards for 2024. This is just last year's. What are the changes?
So there's been a couple of changes. So minor, really, in the scope of what that looks like. So we've updated the income guidelines. What we suggest, my suggestion is going from 130% of the federal poverty line as the amount that somebody can qualify to 150. That's in line with what Fairfield Township currently does for applicant level. It also is more in line really with the realistic level of need because our community's housing cost is really high compared to, so
Because is that poverty line
the average across the
adjusting for inflation as well?
that
quickly?
they average for national level of inflation, but not local level of
and our
housing costs or
market
other stuff.
is pretty
Exactly.
rough. Okay.
So
I'm
that's
okay with
one
that.
piece. Actually, the county, well, HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, Department of Housing and Urban Development does a federal review of housing costs across the nation. And those are fairly, they're accurate to a point, but they're also based on a hand-picked number of units. So they're based their surveys off of 50 units in a county area. And for our case, it includes multiple counties like Benton and other places.
Mm.
So that is already, the number that we already use is conservative because it's probably lower than what the actual real fair market level for housing is in our community.
Yeah.
And as a result, given that it's a random survey, it went down a little bit from last year. So I didn't increase it, but I also didn't decrease it. So I suggested keeping the same fair market rate as last year as the guidelines for what our office is able to provide in assistance as a maximum.
Yeah.
Because our maximum assistance is the fair market rate. So I'm suggesting going off of last year's fair market rate.
Okay.
The other piece, our office, and I know that we've had discussion about this, our office has had a policy of, there's what the state deems wasted resources that we have to consider when it comes to making a decision. Our office has a policy of evaluating for wasted resources of any amount larger than $100 per family. So like the first $100, every family has certain level of expenses, and I don't feel like we should punish someone for just simply having a small amount of non-essential purchases. Now we can still encourage them to do, but what we're really trying to get at is when we're trying to reduce or deny assistance based off of wasted resources, we're trying to get at a serious pattern of misuse of funds to be able to meet their needs, right? So we hadn't, that had been the policy that we've been using, but we hadn't had it specifically outlined. And so we added a page there and made it 100 for families below 3 people, 150 for families of 3 or more.
How are we assessing that?
So we go through, as part of the requirement for township assistance, you have to submit your bank statements, Venmo transactions, PayPal, Cash App, any sort of finances that you utilize. If you don't have those, you're required to provide receipts. Our office has a standing policy of the first time that somebody comes in to request township assistance, if they don't have any of those things, most people don't keep receipts. So the first time we don't utilize that as a way to judge against them,
Sure.
but then they're informed that for any future instance of township assistance, they have to provide receipts if their way of.
So basically, if we ask for documentation, they ghost us, it counts as
Exactly.
wasted. Yeah. Okay.
And so we look at it, and there's a bunch of stuff. So expenses on non-essentials, tobacco shops. We don't count food as a negative unless it's something excessive. There are certain instances where there's been an applicant that has a really high amount of expenses that are unrealistic.
Yeah.
We look at non-essential travel and other pieces. So like if you have a trip to Florida, that's not acceptable. Now, if you have a trip to Florida because your father or family member is passing, we might be willing to make an exception for those circumstances. So, so that's kind of how we evaluate the wasted resources piece, among other things. So those were really the major changes. So we were just updating the numbers for those pieces, and then although we haven't had an instance in our time in office, the trustees is expected to also help with food assistance. So we've never had it. And we generally would recommend that they seek help with pantries or other stuff. But as I've mentioned, there could be exceptions for like dietary restrictions or other pieces that pantries aren't usually able to meet very well, in which case we might be able to do that. And we increase that based off of the SNAP guidelines.
Sure.
And then the last one is the township is allowed to and has had the standards, although we've never had to use it, for stuff like additional costs for household supplies or whatnot that might be essential. And so we did an increase based off of January to January inflation rate at a national level, which was just under 3% for January 2023 to January 2024, or just over 3%. So we went through, did that, and updated that by that amount for those particular caveats. So those were the major changes. I think I added one word somewhere, and I don't remember exactly what that one word was, but it was not major.
Okay. Any other questions from the board about township assistance standards?
Nope.
All right. Motion to vote for resolution 2024-05.
The board calls for a vote on resolution number 2024-05, resolution establishing 2024 township assistance standards. All those in favor of passing resolution 2024-05 signify by saying aye.
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 Resolution passes.
All right. Resolution 2024-06, resolution to authorize annually updated township policies. Similar here. I believe this was just credit card policies that changed. Yeah.
And the one request for capital assets. I know that I'd sent you guys a blurb to all of you over email. So the change was, if you look at the resolution, we requested a specific line added to the credit and debit card policy that essentially says the global credit card limit for the township will be $50,000. That's what the bank requires as we're moving to purchase cards. But we're keeping the individual card limits at the same numbers that we had last year.
So
there can be credit unassigned
Yeah.
to any card.
Okay. So functionally not.
Not
No
changing.
change.
Yeah.
Just one question here, clarification. Section 3, nepotism and contracting policy, got section 3 certification.
Mhm.
Is that something we all should have signed? I don't remember signing anything like that.
My apologies. Let me pull it up because I'm trying to.
Each elected official of the township shall annually certify in writing subject to policies for perjury that the officer is in compliance with this policy, and officer shall submit the certification to the trustee of the township no later than December 31st of each year.
So my understanding, because I've looked it up before and I've asked SBOA, is that we don't really have to certify anything specifically in this front, unless there's an active case of something that we have to document.
Okay.
That has been what the guidance of SBOA has been. I would be willing to, I'm happy to recheck that if necessary. Now, I would also imagine that that this resolution in part does that, but we really don't have any instance of anybody in our case. But I can verify to see if there's any changes. Was that in employment or?
It was under the first part where it says nepotism, contracting policy, section 1 is definition, contracting policy, and section 3 is certification.
Yes. So this one in particular, I'm very certain because we used to submit that, and we used to do it back when I was on the board. But when we went to SBOA and asked, they said that this was only a form that we needed to submit if we did a contract and we had to certify the specific details of it. And so we have to submit those so if at any point we contracted with a relative of yours or something like that to do something, which there really isn't, then we would have to
sign
submit.
off on it.
Correct.
The SBOA originally put in place, everybody had to do annual training, or annually sign these forms, all board members, all elected officials had to do it, had to watch a video on nepotism, all that, have the form signed and submit them back, so they changed that.
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
But it's still,
Painful.
but the language that's recommended is still the same from back then.
That's a good safety.
Yeah. I would like to think that that's obvious to people, but apparently some folks in Fairfield have stretched the definition of obvious pretty far.
And so the other one, which was a minor thing, was equipment. So in the capital assets policy, our request was that for itemizing something that needs to be presented as a capital asset, going to $2,000 or greater instead of $1,000 or greater. I checked as I mentioned, my other employment is the Lafayette River Ministry. They just went through an audit, and I was checking with their finance person, and what their recommendation is for entities of similar size of scope as us is about $2,000 being the limit, because what they're carrying from a capital asset policy isn't stuff like computers or other stuff. It's bigger stuff.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say, otherwise every laptop you buy is gonna be a
I'm
capital
sure
asset,
it's in
which
here,
is
but who
not a capital asset.
who keeps the receipt? Where are the receipts filed? Like who
for purchases and stuff,
for purchases?
we have records in our office. There's a standard which there's a timeline as to when they can be destroyed. Our office has not yet destroyed anything from or sought to destroy any records pursuant to records. But actually, your boss's office, the clerk's office, is the one that dictates what the retention schedule is for pieces. So unless specifically confirmed on retention schedule, we don't destroy anything. But we are actively seeking to verify what
is that actually like, but is that overseen by more than one person? Is there just one kind of?
So we have recently, the township had never had it. As of last year, in late last year, we were able to finalize our internal controls policy. And so the internal controls policy doesn't need to specifically be reviewed every year unless there's a change, as of right now is the guidance that we have. But we have an internal controls policy that dictates, who's reviewing what, when are we looking at it.
Exactly. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
And so we have that, and we are, seeking. We're still a small office, like I mentioned. So we honestly we will never, given the size of our office, have ideal internal controls, but we're seeking to define what is the best practice for our size of office, for, ease and accountability. That balance that internal controls always seeks to get at.
I think that a lot of people sleep better at night knowing that's.
All right.
Would it be appropriate for me to ask a question? I know I'm not on the board, just
So generally, it would be after or before, but you are. If the
Generally, my
chair
opinion is if somebody is not being belligerent, I'm willing to be polite. So go for it.
Have you considered just buying do you have all paper records that you're storing?
So
Or have you started moving to digital storage?
so for we actually that gets at a we. This is a great question.
Scan
So
and
I'll keep it.
store?
I'll keep it short.
So
So
let's time this.
It's more curiosity. I'm sorry.
So we have a digital accounting software, but it doesn't have the ability to attach records to it. Our office last year sought an alternative software solution, and unfortunately, it is not available to municipalities of our size. So we have to have a budget of $5 million or more to be able to access that other accounting tool that is significantly better. So at this moment, we have a combination of paper records and accounting software.
I'm sorry.
Which
I was
is
just curious.
It's an appropriately ridiculous answer.
Yes.
And at the same time, there are some things the state requires you to keep paper.
Yeah.
And and they're kind of vague on what those things are until you don't have them. I mean, it's.
But
Until
it would
you
be-
don't have them, then it's no longer vague.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it would be ideal, and we would love to get to a place where we could have a better electronic record of stuff as well. But at this moment, we don't. Specifically,
I will try to keep any further questions.
Good question. Don't worry about it. It's a good question. We've had that discussion before because it's a little it's frustrating sometimes having your hands tied. All right, vote. I call for a vote on resolution 2024-06.
On resolution number 2024-06, resolution to authorize annually updated township policies. The vote is called. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The vote is passed.
All right, resolution 2024-07 to approve the 2024 budget for the Mobile Integrated Healthcare Grant Fund.
So this is a quick one. We've done this a couple of times. I know, well, for Germany it would be a new, but for you guys, as we've gotten grants, we've sought to authorize the creation of a fund in which to deposit the money and expend money out of. And we've also authorized a budget based off of what the grant award was. And so in this particular case, we had a grant that we requested, more money than we got, and in discussion with the fire chief and in consultation with the MIH director, we set this budget that would have divided it into two line items: $32,125 for medical equipment, and then $5,000 for medical supplies, which are often tied to that same medical equipment.
Yep. Okay. Any further questions? This one's pretty simple. All right. Call for a vote on resolution 2024-07.
On resolution 2024-07, resolution to approve 2024 budget for mobile integrated healthcare 9503 fund. All those in favor of resolution number 2024-07 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion passes.
All right. Last but not least, the resolution 2024-08 authorizing the request of public safety tax local option income tax funds. That is a mouthful.
It is.
I
can go over it again.
It's a real word salad.
Especially
Right.
For the benefit of our new board member and members of the public.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll still keep it relatively short. So our township collects public safety tax dollars for the purpose, local income tax dollars for the purpose of public safety. The county and the municipalities automatically get disbursements. So like incorporated municipalities like the city of West Lafayette, the town of Battleground, Otterburn on our side of the river, on our side of the county line, they get automatic monies dispersed. Townships, who also provide crucial public safety functions through the fire department, do not automatically get disbursements. The law allows for townships to request money for that disbursements. Honestly, there is very few instances where counties and municipalities have been willing to authorize that disbursement, but it's pursuant to what is available, and we're seeking to request it because it's money that's being collected for public safety tax purposes that our residents are paying into and not necessarily getting the benefit out of. And so what we are seeking, and we've had conversations with cities right now. This and the county, city of West Lafayette has been fairly on board with the process. We've had good conversations with most members on the city council already, and at the county level, has been interest from some of the commissioners as to it. We still haven't gotten buy-in from the county council, which would be the body that actually votes on it. But we need to have this statutory resolution for us to go and request that.
Mhm.
And so this would allow us to make that request and require the trustee's office to make that request, which is important because we're trying to be good stewards of of our money and our township's money and our constituents' money. And they're already paying for public safety taxes and their public safety tax and not necessarily receiving that whole benefit because the township doesn't get it for fire protection. So,
And the 3 voting bodies that we need to convince 2 of is Lafayette, West Lafayette, and the county. Yeah.
correct.
And we've got the commissioners mostly on board at this point.
The commissioner's mostly on board overall to the concept, but they're not the body that votes. It's
Yeah,
the county
right.
council.
Any further questions from the board? Call for a vote on resolution 2024-08.
Resolution number 2024-08, authorizing application for public safety tax, local option income tax funds. This is in compliance with Indiana Code 6-3 and 6-6 and Indiana Code 6-3, 6-6, 8C and 6.
There's a bunch of them. Yeah.
-1B. All those in favor of resolution number 2024-08 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes.
All right. Next meeting will be April 16th, 3rd Tuesday of April. Regular meeting. I don't know that we know this far out what's going to be on it, but agenda will be communicated at least a week in advance. All documents will be made available on the same time frame, and hopefully we'll have control of the website by then, so we can get on there.
And if I may add,
Yes.
there's a couple of pieces that will probably be on the agenda just to keep you apprised. I'm hoping to have APC's Ryan O'Gara here for that one, and for you guys to consider a resolution in support of the land use study that the county is developing and the commissioners will consider. That's one piece. There's also tied to the capital assets policy. We will be coming to you guys with a recommendation on what it looks like to surplus capital assets. As we're going through and recording capital assets, there's a process for surplusing. And so what we are seeking to do is our initial recommendation would be to establish a threshold at which it would come to the board and have below that threshold delegate, if the board is comfortable with that, the authority to the trustee to surplus and communicate to you guys when we're surplusing capital assets or declaring them surplus. So
on for the next, did we ever look at a projected cost for tree removal? Because there's still, when I go down to Sand Ridge over here, there are some trees that really we need to take down.
So
it's very expensive.
Yeah. So we are. I don't know that we've got a quote yet, but I know that Amy has been working on a couple of the cemetery pieces that are currently ongoing. We have. Unfortunately, that's one of the areas where it's fire, whatever the current fire is, that's what you're being able to focus more on. Yeah. Right now we have actually an incident at Burton where our fence got hit.
Yes.
And so that's the cemetery sorry, not Burton, excuse me. Hebron.
Right here.
Yeah. Where Hebron's fence got hit, and so we're currently working on that one. So.
I'm like, you got hit again?
No, Hebron. Not Burton this time.
There's a section of Sand Ridge when you come up on Park, the fence is still
damaged from the last tree. Yeah. And that's part of what we are hoping to use this year's budget to repair as well. So.
Are we doing anything with niches?
They are still collecting seed, and so they've been a little bit more quiet about the partnership at the request of other partners because they worry about if we make it too public that the species might get trampled.
Yeah.
But what I have heard, the most recent update that they have, we're scheduling a meeting with them actually as the spring mowing season comes about again, is that they're having a lot of success with some of the more recent batches of seed that they're collecting from the Hills thistle, which is endangered. So, the partnership's going well.
Good. Glad to hear it.
That's an area where no news is good news. So.
And the Granville Bridge area, that's still under that, all that could be affected by the LEAP program, which would be really disastrous.
Any other announcements before we adjourn?
Minor, and I'll send you guys an email. Lafayette's fire union is hosting an event in support of one of their firefighters who have. Remind me of the family's name. Is it Butts?
Butts, yeah.
The Butts family. His wife is having cancer, and really it's not a great prognosis. And so they're trying to raise funds to support the family in the interim. And so they're doing a pancake breakfast specifically, and also having games and other stuff. And so I will send that to you guys and encourage you to support that if you're able to.
Well, didn't he have a stroke?
He also did, yes.
Yeah, like 42, 45 years old.
43.
All right. Well, our thoughts are with them.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else, I'll move to adjourn.
Oh, let's stay and talk.
Aye.
All right.
Do we need to sign these?
On Hill will docu-sign them to us.
Okay.
Okay. Easier for everyone.